In a world where every click leaves a footprint, what does it mean to move with intention and to keep your secrets your own? Today, we explore the promise and pressure of building systems that protect dignity at scale, privacy as a default, sovereignty as a design choice, resilience as a shared responsibility. Our guest today is Adrian Brink, early Cosmos core developer, co-founder of Anoma and Namada, and a steady hand in the evolution of Web3. We'll trace how his work moves from idea to infrastructure, from intent-based cross-chain coordination in Anoma to Namada's asset-agnostic shielded sets and rewards that treat data protection as a public good. We'll talk through the hard parts, designing for a fragmented world, navigating blackouts and sanctions, and making cryptography usable without giving up control. And we'll step back to ask what this means for communities, institutions, and anyone who wants to choose what they share and with whom. It's a conversation about tools and about trust, about building networks that bend toward freedom without breaking under the weight of reality. Welcome to the Defiant Podcast. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Defiant Podcast. I'm your host, Vinny, and I'm here with Adrian Brink, who is a co-founder of Anoma and Namada. Previously, he worked at Tendermint, working on Cosmos as the third core developer and head of partnerships, as well as at the Web3 Foundation as a technologist. Thank you so much for joining us, Adrian.
Great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in. We had a really exciting week this week with the Tornado Cash case going on, as well as a couple of other things globally. But I'd love to start with your background and some of the projects that you've brought into the world. So working on Cosmos, Anoma, Namada. What is it about their design or the ambitions that fill you with the most excitement? So was there a moment in your journey that all of a sudden you thought there was a lack of privacy in existing systems that felt like a call to action to push you to imagine these new products?
Yeah, so I got into the space, I got into Ethereum back in 2016 because I wrote my grad thesis on censorship-resistant e-voting. And this was during the time of the Catalan independence movement in Spain, right? And so I wrote my thesis on can we use national ID cards to have censorship-resistant elections independent of whether the national government likes them. Because there's sort of a very basic thesis that if 15% of the population want to secede, they can.
Right.
It doesn't require 51% to want to overthrow the government. 10 to 15 generally tends to be enough, right? And so it becomes this huge coordination bottleneck. And Ethereum at the time struck me as the right sort of substrate to build applications that actually leverage this tech, right? And so that's how I got into the space. I think the main thing, though, for me has always been about self-sovereignty and the ability for communities to have sovereign infrastructure that makes them resistant against hostile influences. And I think about this from sort of two perspectives. So I nowadays live in Switzerland, and the Swiss were very paranoid with World War II and getting nuked. So there are now nuclear bunkers in pretty much every building. A little bit nuts. But it's a fair point, which is on the eve of World War III, most fiber cables will probably just go away, and Ethereum and Bitcoin will just halt. So
right.
I've always wanted to build infrastructure that was actually local in nature, that I can run the Swiss financial system or the Swiss coordination system just locally, independent of sort of what global internet connectivity looks like. Of course, still being composable globally. As you regain connectivity, you may as well compose globally. This is why passports and phones work really well. So we want to maintain this feature, but the current financial system doesn't really have the feature. It's you can get cut off from New York and everything just still works. If Visa gets cut off from New York, Visa just stops working. So that's point one. And point two is when you think about this as community defense, and I really think about this as sovereign infrastructure for community defense, it's I don't want my data to be leaked to China or North Korea. And
we can all agree on that.
Yeah. But the problem is I'm under no illusion that the Swiss or the US banking system is actually secure against this threat.
Right.
Because these the banks have massive honeypots. So it's how do I design a system that's actually secure for my local community, right? And that's sort of where the privacy aspect, and especially this opt-in privacy aspect comes in. Because honestly, it's a national security risk if you have a financial system that leaks a ton of data, not on purpose, but just by how it was structurally designed. Because we're all using these systems that are honestly designed in the 60s, 70s. They weren't designed for hostile internet. the US military was just like starting to figure out how the internet worked in practice. We should be nowadays systems just need to be very aware that like of the threat model that exists in practice, and like also like how does internet connectivity play in. So like to me, I'm only in the space to build like local like sovereign systems so that people can run sovereign infrastructure over the internet, over like local mesh networking with the configurability that they care about.
Yeah, and it's, it is such a relevant risk, unfortunately, to worry about losing our networks. Like that is, they say like hacking, cybersecurity is the number one threat to most countries these days, even in some ways more so than nuclear. Obviously, they're related. So, what are you going to do when the infrastructure is built for spies and not for hackers? You're going to lose.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's this asymmetric scenario that I think most people can't imagine. Like, there's no chance in hell that like Switzerland can defend its infrastructure against North Korea. Like, it just will never work in practice.
Right.
So like we've got to like leverage technology to actually build infrastructure that's like secure by default to some extent.
Secure by default. We love to see it. Because that's the other thing, right? I think we have a lot of transparency in blockchain that's like really great until it's really not great. And so we have these kind of new, products like wallets that are kind of coming in to solve that privacy issue, or even ZK. And so it's really cool to hear that you're kind of, instead of creating a Band-Aid, you're like, how do we re-envision this and just like start from the ground up?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about your collaborations because, as a co-founder, you obviously have a couple people that are working with you on this project. And there's kind of like a shared creation vibe here. And I'd love to hear like, how has collaborating with Awa Sun Yin and Christopher Goes affected like your visions for privacy and sovereignty?
I think honestly, the shared vision has always been more about sovereignty. Because sovereignty is sort of like the cornerstone of it, right? And for example, Anoma is not a privacy preserving system by any means. It just happens to have the right cryptographic primitives so that you can build applications that may be private if you want to as a developer. But it's like, It's very different. It's much more like Ethereum in that sense, except there are like more opcodes. And less like something like Zcash, which is just private by sort of design, essentially. No, the collaborations are fun. I think just as advice to anyone in the space, like going these journeys alone kind of sucks. And I think like realistically, don't do it. Find some other smart people, do interesting things with them. And like overall, honestly, just like do interesting things. I think we are getting very much caught up nowadays in just, chasing yet another like shitcoin trend. And I think this is actually, it's hugely problematic for the space when you practically look at it, because innovation really has slowed down to close to zero. Right. In my view, there's like, we're like a third generation of blockchains, and like Anoma is like a third generation, but like Nia, Solana, it's Ethereum in a different color. I mean, like, I don't know how else to phrase it. It's like cool, it's slightly faster, but like fundamentally it does exactly the same thing. And so like, I think this is really my message, like find interesting people, work with interesting people, but actually do interesting things. Don't just go, we can just like copy the same 3 contracts to the next EVM roll up. And for some reason, this is going to make global finance work better. I mean, like, you can delude yourself into thinking that that is true, but it's very unlikely to be true in the long term. Yeah, I think definitely at this point, Ethereum has, especially now, I mean, hitting, way up to like 4,500 almost. And like, the way that Ethereum has really rallied in 2025, I think is really promoting its dominance across these other L1s that like, yeah, I don't know. I think interestingly enough, I haven't seen communities rally around other blockchains to the same extent as Ethereum. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a little bit of the feature because like, I mean, when we came up with Ethereum back in the day, it was all very small. I mean, like DEFCON 3 in Cancun, we were like 800 people. Like it was small. It was very small. And very so I think intimate. That was a huge benefit. I mean, like I miss those days, and I think pretty much everyone else also misses those days. I do think we shouldn't get distracted by the price movements either, though. Like Ethereum also hasn't changed as much. It's a problem. Like, we were promised this world computer, and instead we got like, now there's like 20 different world computers that vaguely do the same thing. And like, as in like all the L2s, I mean, the entire L2 thing, the roll-up roadmap became this incredibly messy, like instead of having like one actual computer, I now have like 15 vaguely related things that are very difficult to use in practice because I have to keep switching wallets for some reason. And like, none of my assets to really work across these systems. I mean, this is why I'm so excited about Anoma, because Anoma is actually building the infrastructure for an actual world computer. Like, you can deploy Anoma to Ethereum, you can deploy to Arbitrum, to Optimism, your favorite rollup, even Solana and Nia. I don't care, but it just gives you then a like unified operating system. It's a distributed operating system with many possible backends under the hood.
That's so great. You can like kind of wear multiple hats here, where it's like on one hand, you can have your opinions about, which systems you prefer, but then you can also build something that's like, well, we know people have different desires. We know there's Solana maxis out there, so whatever, like, bring them on.
I mean, this is specifically, I think we also really shouldn't forget this. Like, people claim like, oh, what's the best security model? And the honest answer, there isn't. Like, there is no best security model. My parents will never trust Ethereum, no matter how decentralized it is, because decentralization is not a feature to them. Like, they like the local court system. They just want to have a system secured by the local courts. And so it seems very, blockchain communities over time tend to become very statist. Where it's like, oh, you should only like me and like my model is clearly the best. Whereas we've always taken the view that, let's be topology agnostic. Like, people can decide how they want to run Anoma. If they all want to trust Ethereum, Anoma works on Ethereum. If they all want to trust Bitcoin, Anoma works on Bitcoin. If it's like half, fine. If for some reason want to have a one world government on a big server run by the UN, Anoma supports this. I mean, I'm not saying I'm personally a fan of this, but fundamentally the architecture is just this topology agnostic that like you can configure to whatever you like, which I think we shouldn't lose sight of. Like, there's no single global like best fit for everyone. It's like different people. In Argentina, you will have a different requirement than in Germany, for example. And we should just be very honest and transparent about this. So we actually build systems that people want to use in practice.
Yeah, I think it's really important to really acknowledge how people in different countries are coming for different reasons, and they have different problems that you're trying to solve, right? I mean, in Latin America, you're thinking about perhaps, cross-border payments. Maybe you're thinking about the fact that their fiat cannot be trusted, and that in some cases their government cannot be trusted, and then thinking also about like what are the actual internet infrastructures of some places. Like, there are places in the world with no internet, So how do we kind of try to serve people and bring them options that help them in their everyday? I think it's a great place to start a business from.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about sovereignty, resilience, and privacy, because it's fun and we love it. So one of the foundational principles behind Anoma is the focus on privacy by default blockchain infrastructure. So users are invited to express their intentions rather than to simply execute transactions, which is a subtle shift, but I think it really is quite profound at the same time. So how do you see intent-based transactions reshaping our understanding of privacy, not just for individuals, but also for communities who are looking to preserve some element of sovereignty?
Yeah, so I would push back against this a little bit, but Anoma is not private by default. There's nothing in Anoma that's actually particularly private. Again, it's like Ethereum. It just has, so like when you think about Ethereum added the BN128 opcode so that we could like verify Groth16 proofs back in like when, 2018, 2019? I forget exactly when we added those opcodes, but Anoma is designed like this, just with much more modern opcodes in mind. So you can actually like deploy modern cryptography and modern ZKP techniques to Anoma without having to rely. Like, what all the rollups do is incredibly funny on Ethereum, because we haven't changed any of the underlying primitives. We're now always doing like a fancy a new ZK proof, and then wrap this in a Groth16 proof so we can actually verify this on Ethereum. And like, it's like the most oxymoronic thing to possibly build at the moment, instead of just adding like some basic cryptography.
Yeah, like why are you putting all these layers on top? Like, the cake is too big, guys.
Yeah. No, so, but what Anoma does is, Anoma is a distributed operating system. So Anoma takes all these different systems, and you can really think of them as like different CPU architectures, like Solana, Ethereum, they're just different CPU architectures. And Anoma just says, what's the common primitives that we can expose to application developers here? So what's the Windows 95 moment? And this is really why I'm so excited about Anoma, because Anoma is the Windows 95 moment, because all of a sudden you don't have to write an application specifically for the EVM or specifically for the SVM. You write this for Anoma, and then just happens to run on the EVM. It happens to run on the SVM. And now users can make the choice where they want, they don't buy Word because that specific copy of Word was written for the EVM. They buy Word and go, today I would like to run it on Solana, and tomorrow I'd like to run it on Ethereum, right? And this is sort of where the power of this abstraction comes from. This is where computers became very cool, because we started having these operating systems that honestly made them a lot less complex.
I know, I feel less stressed somehow.
Fantastic. And so then the second component is the intents, right? And Anoma is very intent-centric, because this transaction centricity really came from the original Bitcoin model of like, I go to a store, I give you some Bitcoin, you give me some milk, we're all happy. Right. And then Ethereum went like, oh, let's just make some transactions program. But the problem is that like practically in the real world at the moment, most people don't know the counterparty that they want to interact with, right? Like I have the intent that I'd like to trade some ETH for Bitcoin. That's not an actual transaction I can settle anywhere. Like I have to find, maybe there's one counterparty, maybe there's 1,000 counterparties, right? So intents really capture this abstraction, which is I have a partial thing and I'd like other people, and I'd like to find other people that I don't particularly know, like on a case-to-case basis, with whom to execute this coordination. This is also where, like, for example, like optional disclosure comes in massively with Anoma, which is very hard to do in other systems. Like when you think of something like Circle and USDC, Circle always has a problem that like, they want to prevent bad actors from using USDC, which I get. That's very correct. But they can't really do this on Ethereum because it's very, very difficult for them to describe in a succinct statement that like only people on this whitelist are not on that blacklist. That's very difficult to do in protocol. With Anoma, you can just do this. Like you write an application, go like, I only want to trade some USDC with people that are not on this blacklist or that are only on this whitelist. So you can make your execution incredibly configurable. And so like if you, for example, want to just have like these gated trading environments, where you just want to allow a couple of member firms to it. Like this is something you can very easily build with Anoma, which is very difficult to build in other systems. Just fundamentally around how the design choices ended up being with regards to intents. And so like practically when you look at nowadays, like 95%, 99% of all like transaction volumes should really be intents. We just keep for some reason paying ridiculous gas fees to execute all these transactions, even though we really don't have to. And like intents also give you this other huge benefit, which is like I can quote a new intent every half a second, every 200 milliseconds, whatever. Like this is honestly, it depends on like how fast the person on the other side wants to like read my intents. Because intents by default aren't settled in consensus. So we don't have to execute them in consensus so they can be free. So like I can keep quoting a new price to you and you just go, okay, I like this specific price point. And then like you take one of my 100 intents and go, now let's settle this. And so this is the huge power of intents.
The PR Genius is a top crypto PR and growth marketing agency, helping brands globally with expert PR and strategic growth marketing. They've worked with 300 plus projects like Movement Labs and IO.net. Unlike traditional agencies, they charge only on performance. Their services include earned PR opportunities and marketing services to help boost wallet holders and organic X followers. Learn more at www.theprgenius.com.
I mean, lower transaction fees is always a win for us crypto users because, a lot of money goes there. But this kind of actually, I think, ties really well into, we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but the Tornado Cash suit that's happening right now, where it's kind of like the accusation is you created a system where people were obviously going to do illegal financial activity. And so like these intents seem to be a kind of solve to that, where you're saying you can put some parameters around who is interacting with it. But do you see that as something that could potentially lead to a better...
yes, like application developers could certainly do this. Again, this is like Anoma. Like the core infrastructure, really, it doesn't know what the price is. It doesn't know what NAS it is. It knows none of these things. It knows like, here are some keys in a database. And like my intent says I'm willing to like not have these keys anymore if and only if like, the parameters in this database get updated to this specific new value. But certainly this kind of flexibility allows you to build much more flexible systems. I do think, to be frank, that like the Tornado Cash example is a much sort of the more prominent problem actually becomes with like, is encryption technology speech, right? And we had the Zimmerman cases in, I guess, the 80s in the US, where it's like, well, cryptography is covered under free speech. And honestly, this is like a lot more where this lies, what do open source developers, like what kind of guardrails do they need to follow, or is it speech? And I mean, I'm a strong advocate that a lot of this is speech, because otherwise we are living in this very like 1984 dystopian censorship regime where you have to get all your speech pre-approved in case someone else may utilize some of your words for like bad things. And I mean, this is not how any other consumer protection works either. Like people are still allowed to go to buy cars, even though we know there's a bunch of bad people keep buying cars, and we always wonder why the Toyotas keep showing up in the Middle East. And like, no one is really extracting on like, well, Toyota, I mean, you're clearly buying cars, and they happen to end up a lot in the Middle East. It's kind of weird. Yeah.
It's the market. It's almost like it's a consumer product.
Yeah. No, so I think, but certainly having more flexible systems at its core is going to allow people to build better systems. And I think, so on top of this, we also have to design for like this multi-jurisdictional approach, right? Like not everything is going to be like under US jurisdiction, everything is going to be under French jurisdiction, whatever. But we still want to have financial systems that are fairly interoperable. And so like you want to have a system, for example, if I live in Switzerland, I need to adhere to Swiss sanctions above all else. So like the systems that we currently have in place in Ethereum really don't do this justice, because like we only enforce like one set of legal constraints. And so like I much more hope that with more flexible systems, we can be much more granular in terms of like what rules apply where, because I think it's going to make our integration with the existing financial system much easier.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they don't want to have to be fighting you on you like compliant with their laws, right? So that makes a lot of sense. So I'd love to talk about we kind of have an interesting world we're living in with multiple wars, with network blackouts, with sanctions, with, a lot of crypto regulation finally getting passed. But of course, again, we're talking about a global financial market, and how you operate in the US is going to be different than how you operate in the UK, in the EU, et cetera. How do you work on these like high risk environments when you're thinking about like how to give the best service to people globally, but still like keeping that foundation really secure for everybody?
Yeah, this is a huge advantage of Anoma. Anoma it's like TCP/IP Linux. It is fundamentally neutral open source code. You can take it, you can deploy it into like a global jurisdiction, like a global setup. You can deploy it as like the Swiss chain if you wanted to, as the German chain, as the US chain, as the British chain, you name it. You can, like, if you're a company, you can go Volkswagen, I'm running my sovereign Volkswagen chain. But in the end, it's just open source technology that people can really deploy in various topologies. And I think here, Anoma just gives you very good primitives. So you can build systems that are good for your local community so that you don't leak all your financial data to North Korea. Like this is, I really think about this actually as a huge problem, where it's, I think, like if crypto gets too much adoption at the moment, I think there will come a point where like I'd be in favor of national governments just shutting it down, because it becomes a huge national security risk if we keep leaking all our financial transactions to like third countries. It's just not a good idea. I mean, like, I've got to be very honest. Like, if Ethereum becomes the global payment standard tomorrow, we should stop this. It's not a smart move.
We're not ready.
This is under no circumstances. This is a smart move, right? With Anoma, you just get a bunch of good primitives that you can deploy in these like very topology agnostic fashions, where you're like, okay, like maybe the Swiss government like to run a Swiss internal payment system just on this chain, and it's secured by them, and they can configure to their parameters of their liking. But the nice thing is, applications still work. So you still get the entire operating system abstraction. So like applications from the global world computer still work on the Swiss computer. Application state can actually roam. So you don't have to have this problem which you currently have between all the like L1s, which is, let me unwind my CDP so I can create a new CDP on the other system. You can just like take actual complex pieces of state with you and roam with those complex pieces of state. And so I think with that, we will end up in a much better world where it's a world that's just much more composable, which isn't like dominated by a couple of big servers, but rather many small systems that all can cooperate and interact with each other without imposing a super high cost on users. I mean, this is like very realistically what we currently face, which is like the roll-up stuff. I can't explain this to anyone not in crypto. They all think I'm ridiculous. Like figure out like there's these 15 different things and they're all kind of the same, but not really. Some are faster, some are slower, some may steal your money. We don't really know. There's like a bunch of multi-sigs involved, but don't worry too much about it. Like, I mean, it's just like moronic when you actually explain this from first principles to an outsider. I think in crypto we've gotten used to this to a large extent, and as a result we can actually live with this. But I think this is not going to be the status quo that's going to onboard the next like 100 million people. It's going to be like more around like how do you build actually useful applications at scale that can run in various different security models, where as a developer I don't have to make a choice whether to go with AWS or GCP before I write a single line of code. No Web2 developer is ever going to believe me when I tell them, no, you need to pick your specific deployment strategy right now before you touch anything else. And you can never change it after. And never, ever can you change this again. And if you want to deploy to the other thing, it's going to be super awkward. And like with Anoma, it's like, Well, in the end, the user may want to run the application on a chain that was going to be deployed in 2 years from now. And this still works.
So how do you balance like all the different programming languages that people might be using to create these?
So this is actually quite nice with Anoma. You can, of course, build many different specific front-end languages for Anoma. At the moment, you can just write applications in Rust. Like generally speaking, to build an application for Anoma, you write a little bit of Rust, a little bit of Elixir to like hook up some of the backend code, but that's it. In the long term, I think ideally we should move to something more like Juvix, which is a programming language that really takes care of zero knowledge proofs in the same environment, so that you can, like, currently it's very awkward to write specific circuits because you always have to you write your circuit part and then you write your language part, your smart contract part in a different language, and that makes it very difficult to actually make composable. Juvix gets rid of a lot of these problems. So I do think that over the long run, people will be writing applications much more in Juvix than anything else. Let's see. For now, it's just Rust. I mean, it's very easy.
All right, developers, we want to hear your thoughts. So yeah, I'd love to linger a little bit on this idea of like how we try to onboard the next 100 million users and how we kind of make sure that, you know, they're caring about decentralization, but they're also not like feeling like that's turning them off because they don't know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I don't think the next 100 million users are going to care about decentralization. This is like, as I was saying this earlier, right? Like my parents don't. I think most people invest. I think most, and they shouldn't. That's sort of the point. Like most people in Western Europe really shouldn't. Like decentralization is a huge feature if you have unstable governments and like unstable national systems. But if you live in Switzerland, I mean, like, sure, it's fun to interact with it, but like you don't fundamentally need it because you trust your local system quite a bit. So I think the trick to onboarding the next 100 million users isn't so much to sell them on the idea of decentralization. It's to sell them on the idea this is a much more composable coordination layer that like can run in your local environment, but can also be composable on global Ethereum. Essentially, like you removing a lot of sort of trade barriers to international applications with these systems, where it's like, oh, I'd like to build an application. Some people may want to use it on like their local government chain. Some may want to run it on like global Anoma. Some want to run it on Ethereum. But like I, as an application developer, I built a good application. And then people decide where they specifically want to run it. And I think this is it's going to be a much more compelling selling point where it's like, now we can build true cross-border commerce again and like make all these financial integrations actually work very well. I don't know how many people actually have tried to send like large wires. It's amazing. Like if you send a wire from like Switzerland to New York or to actually Canada, that was the most interesting experience I've had. They lost the wire for like 3 weeks. And like it took me calling my bank and the other guy calling his
bank. And the other bank.
And then they looked for Post-it notes. Like it was mind blowing. They just forgot to input the data. Yeah, it then took 3 weeks to resolve. And it's like, and you just go like, how? Why? Why is this process so manual? This like should all be instant. But yeah, no, this is the current system. Like, so people really underestimate like on what kind of like we've built this sort of appearance of a well-functioning coordination system right now on top of a house of cards. And like to me, sort of the idea with crypto has always been like, we've built this financial infrastructure in the 70s and 80s. At some point, we've got to replace it. And crypto probably seems to be our best shot. Where it's like you want to build complex interactions into supply chains, for example. Like with Anoma, you can just do this because you can specify all these things as intents. And so like, I think this is really like where the next 100 million people come from. They won't come here because we go like, but don't trust fiat. Or like, you should put all your savings into Bitcoin. I mean, maybe that's still a good idea, but like that's a very different sales pitch. Like we want to pitch people on like it makes your life easier. Kind of like Amazon exists to make ordering stuff on the internet easier. Crypto just means like it's an easier payments experience. It's an easier. I have a quicker experience when I want to send you like $5 for coffee kind of thing. We can do easier like bill splitting. If I do a large order, like I can take the order and like use this as a collateral for like I buy a car and then I get the title in my actual wallet and then I take this title and put it into and like go to a bank and go like, here, please issue me a loan against this car. Here's the title and things like this, right? Like this will make a lot of things much easier. And I think this is where actually the major adoption case is going to come from.
Yeah. And I think there's also like a growing need for like financial literacy. And, you know, we're looking at a world where a lot of jobs are just not going to exist anymore in literally the next year. 5 years, 10 years. And so like I kind of see DeFi and crypto as like not just a way to enhance our lives dealing with what we have to deal with already, but like as a potential, another stream of income for a lot of people. Like I think it could become something that people really need to really rely on, because we can't rely on our governments to ethically regulate AI. I mean, we can't even ask them to regulate the internet. You know what I mean? Like they're still so behind on like catching up to where we are technologically.
Yeah, absolutely. This was actually one of the first ideas for Anoma, which I thought people thought we were nuts. But like when I think about...
That's a good start. That's always a good sign.
Like one of the big coordination failures is actually climate change. Like when you think of it as like,
yes.
And I'm not even saying like that whether like we should be doing something about it or not, but it's more like the thing that we're currently doing is clearly moronic, because we have a bunch of like rating agencies that like give out these green stickers, and that like then gets mandated like, but you need to have the green sticker to sell your product. That's a very like weird top level way to address the problem. It'd be much easier if we just capture more information in the price of things. And price is a very reductive argument, right? Like when you go to Starbucks and pay $5, that's like a very unidimensional like information point. If you could like say, here's $5 and here are my preferences, as in like you give an intent, and you have an underlying intent matching engine that goes like, you also prefer like to have some carbon credits offset the cost of a Starbucks, for example, or like the CO2 cost of the Starbucks. And then like the intent matching engine under the hood purchases some CO2 certificates. Now we have a much more information rich sort of like economic framework, and we can make way smarter choices on like, what do people actually want? And we can do like build a lot of this automatically, where we do like people just reveal their preferences, like their specifically lived preferences. And we can design systems around the like specifically lived preferences, rather than we think people like CO2 certificates, so we mandate them in order to be accepted into some ESG fund. And now all the banks are only allowed to sell ESG funds. And you're like, that seems to be a bad idea to like tackle this problem. We need more information here to like actually solve this at the root.
What if sending crypto felt more human? Pulse just launched Red Packets, a new way to gift tokens with meaning. It's gasless, gamified, and claimable inside group chats only. Think airdrops meet social cues on-chain. Backed by smart wallet tech and live across major L2s, Red Packets turn communities into microeconomies of gratitude and growth. No seed phrases, no friction, just connection with value. Check it out at pulse.social.
I think, going back to what you spoke about with like the local first kind of idea, I mean, I'm sure this example you just gave would be great in a place like San Francisco or New York, where it's densely populated. And yes, we care about offsetting carbon footprints. We live in a carbon center, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
I feel like this is a really cool feature where you could really get into like not only collecting a little bit of data about like how many people want to use that feature, but also curating it based on these communities.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's like really cool.
No, it's all about tackling collective action problems in the end. And like, can we get enough coordination going to like effectively start tackling these collective action problems?
And I like the idea that like, with the intents, like anybody could kind of start a trend, so to speak, right? You put out the intent, other people start to see it, and then it can turn into this like larger thing that actually makes an impact. That's pretty grassroots.
Like, for example, for me, I would love to tag my energy bill. Like every time I pay my energy bill, I'd love to tag it with like, I prefer nuclear power. And I kind of do this, but it's very difficult at this point, because like they give you like you want to have the dirty nuclear power option, like all grayed out, and like it's like you feel bad about clicking. And I'm like, no, I definitely want this. This is a much better idea.
Are you saying there's propaganda?
No.
Never. So you have talked about describing Anoma's vision as creating infrastructure that enables communities to control their own ecosystems. That's kind of like what we've been talking about just now. What role do you see cryptography playing, not just as a technical tool, but also as a medium to explore freedom and to explore trust?
Yeah, so cryptography, it's a great leveling field. I mean, specifically, zero knowledge falls into like one of two categories, right? It's like it's either computational compression or computational privacy. You take a lot of compute and you sort of hide all the inputs, or you take a lot of compute and just like go, here's the true value. So that's, I think, where cryptography really shines. I think local communities will always need this, because it's very hard to build these trust systems without strong cryptographic proofs.
Right.
And like, we are kind of trying to hide over this fact a lot in our current societies. And this is, I think, why trust is really fraying, actually, because it's very hard to trust things that you just like randomly see and receive over the internet because it's all unauthenticated. And like 100 years ago, we didn't have this problem because your trust circle was the 200 people in your village. And like you saw each other like once a week, right? So cryptography is about scaling this trust and like making this work to slightly larger sets of people. Now, I don't think that you can use cryptography to scale trust systems to hundreds of millions of people, actually. I think there's sort of a very natural limit to like what a single governance system can handle. And I've become very pessimistic. I think like the right country size is probably 10 million people. Like anything beyond 10 is probably too much. Because it becomes so divergent in terms of what people want, how often they talk to each other. Like when I think about this in Switzerland, I've only lived here 7.5 years, and I'm like 2 hops away from the current national government. And like, this is just like, it's hard to achieve if you're 230 million people or something, like because your scale gets much more different. So I think that's one aspect. And the other aspect is actually like, how do you secure yourself as a local community? How do you make yourself tamper-proof against outsiders? How do you make your data resilient against outside influence? How do you make sure that you don't leak data to sort of like very external parties? And this is why like, I think like, one of the reasons why I should care about privacy is for this like community or / national defense approach that like you don't want to leak all your like networking graph to North Korea. I mean, this is why in the US and the West in general, like we're very toxic towards TikTok because for the first time we're experiencing what it means to like leak large amounts of data to third countries. And I really think, I mean, this should be the wake-up call that maybe the right design isn't that like we hope that we're always globally the best player, but rather we like design systems where we just like everyone can like have local data sovereignty, for example. Because like now the sort of path dependency is turning against us. And now we're like, oh, damn it. I wish we weren't leaking all this data. I'm like, yeah, we should be building infrastructure to make this possible in practice.
You're like, duh. But I think TikTok's a great example, right? Like both the fact that, like you said, I don't think anyone in the US thought that a Chinese app would overtake Facebook or Instagram or, like they were actually, I read a lot of reporting around this in the beginning. They were shocked that a Chinese built app would be outperforming every American built app. And so I think there was a little bit of like an ego bruising going on there. And then, like you said, the immediate shock of like, oh, snap, what do we do now? Like, what do we do now that this is growing in popularity and it's taking all this data and nobody cares? Because like, we don't talk about privacy in the US. If anything, we're in this environment where it's like, yeah, put everything online. Who cares what Mark Zuckerberg does with your data? It's fine. It's American made. And then it's like the only time the conversation changes is when TikTok enters the field. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know how many people remember Venmo, but do you remember like when Venmo tried to be the social network where like in order to post you had to pay someone and I think at that point even like normal people were like, wait, this is starting to get really weird.
Yeah, this makes no sense. Like I'll just text them.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about that. That's funny, especially thinking like now we're in the opposite realm with, Elon Musk trying to turn X into a Venmo chat video. But I digress.
Yeah.
So sovereignty, resilience, and control, all the things we've been talking about today, are deeply human political ideals. And you've chosen technology as the best way to, to address these things that we care about. So do you believe that blockchain technology alone has the power to transform societal structures? Or is it like one piece of a bigger puzzle that we're trying to solve here?
I think specifically like blockchains and Anoma have the potential to sort of provide the technical substrate for social like coordination change to happen in practice. I don't think they're enough in itself. Like societies don't change because like some fundamental new technology came around. I mean, like we then see sort of like some new technology comes around and then we can do more things. And I think it will be the same thing here where it's like, oh, now we have more capabilities. Like we've adapted our toolbox. And this is sort of what I meant earlier also like with the innovation in crypto has stopped because like we really haven't done very many new things because we haven't had the tools to do many new things. Because again, like Near, Solana, Ethereum are kind of all the same thing. So like we haven't had like, as a result, like it feels very stagnant. But I think like as soon as new capabilities emerge, we can actually then go, okay, what can we do with these new with these new capabilities? And for example, can we do very integrated supply chain tracking? And by the way, this isn't even about just like about carbon credits. It's also like, I don't want my local forest to be deforested to like cut down to paper, to produce paper, right? And it's like being able to express this kind of like, I like my local environment to be nice is a huge component of like what economies like should be doing. And like when you realistically look at like what sort of the abstraction of money has done, it has allowed us to outsource the destruction to other places. But now so we're getting this boomerang effect where it's like now it's also starting to affect like the places that we very deeply care about. And so like having this new capability to like, oh, I care, like I'd like to live in a nice, like safe place. And I think that's going to unlock a lot of societal potential where then society can go, cool, what do we do with these new tools?
Yeah, and I'll be curious to see the effects that it might have on politics as well. Because something that I've seen in the US is the ways in which, you know, different parts of the country are represented in government does not necessarily reflect the way that the people in those communities actually think and feel. And what you're describing is a system where, again, we can do it like on a case-by-case thing, whether it's about pollution or deforestation or carbon footprint or whatever. And we can like create these systems around these things that we care about. And I'll be curious to see if that has any effect on not necessarily the way people vote, but just like, how does that affect politicians and what they do? And like, can we combat, you know, a great example is like pollution is covered by free speech in the US. Like it's literally an act of free speech because of some case, you know, decades ago. And so it's like, okay, well, if that is free speech, then shouldn't it also be free speech that we can protect our environments? Yeah. So like what you're building is an interesting, you know, it could be used as an interesting tool against these, you know, bigger systems that are somehow legal.
Yeah, I mean, this is a little bit the problem, right? Especially with politics in the US, the level of abstraction is very, very high. 2 governors, no, 2 senators to a state, right? And then then you pass all these ominous bills. I'm not actually sure that you want to have a system where, like, you, for example, do public referendums and everything. But you much more want to have a system where like you do local voting and then like you slowly just gather more and more information and then like you slowly start percolating, like small towns form opinions on things. And then like this starts percolating into like an actual like national idea of like what we should be doing or what we shouldn't be doing. It's less like currently democracy feels very binary. It's like, oh, I vote once every 4 years and I hope that the guy that I vote for like does the right thing. Right. Whereas if I can just like express some preferences of what I want, maybe if enough of us do it, we just get like such a huge preference expression. And then like we just start combining these preferences and go like, okay, this is actually what we nationally want to be achieving right now, rather than having to pretend that like voting every 4 years sort of like does the same thing. I mean, it does kind of work. It just doesn't do a great job at it anymore.
Exactly. It's okay. Like, there's definitely room for improvement. And I think that's something that I love about the crypto industry is like there is this opinion, this kind of like guiding force of like things can always be better. You know, we never get bored. We're always like, how can we create things that serve people better and like that adjust to our changing needs? Like AI wasn't really in our conversation 10 years ago. It is now. Yeah. So what are we going to do about it?
AI is interesting. Is going to like all of AI is going to use intents. I mean, this is like Ilya has spoken a bunch about this. Like all of like every AI agent will just be not issuing transactions because that's super expensive. Like AI agents will negotiate with each other via intents. And like there's no other substrate for this at the moment besides Anoma to actually make this work in practice. So this is like they will like use stablecoin payments to like pay each other for like tiny bits of information. But like, so this sort of fundamentally comes down to like, we need this kind of infrastructure to handle some of the other technological developments that we've done over the last couple of decades in order to make them safe and usable by us. And I really think that Anoma can sort of like fill a small piece of that puzzle of like how we do all this coordination. I mean, like doing all this coordination, I say small piece of a puzzle, but like it's a huge piece of the puzzle. But it can really help us tie back together a lot of these separate technologies in order to like make this actually feel cohesive and nice to use as a normal person.
And I feel like the intent system would be really interesting to see like how AI agents start interacting with them. Because again, it's like this AI is based on the human brain, right? Neural networks. And so like now we have intents, which is it's a little more flexible than like I want to do this transaction from A to B.
I would say
it kind of makes sense. Very free form, yes.
You can say very arbitrary things. You can say, I want to trade A for B if the weather's nice in Paris. And if not, I'd like to delete all my assets. Whether that's a smart idea or not, I don't know. But like, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of what you want to express. You can also like do multiple conditionals and things like this. It's going to be very cool.
Yeah, no, and I can see this being something that, both more advanced users and some more like intro users can really get a lot out of, which is I think a great product. Like you want something like a computer, right? You could be a hacker, you can be a videographer, you can also just look at cat pics on the internet, but the computer is the same for everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
So to start just wrapping up, you're working at the intersection of advanced technology and pretty fundamental societal needs. So how do you personally stay grounded amid this intense pace of innovation and just the immense responsibility of what you're building?
So it's open source tech. Everyone can contribute. I think people really, crypto has evolved over the years. So fundamental innovation actually takes quite a while. On the day-to-day basis, it's a grind. Honestly, it's not difficult to stay grounded. I think it's quite fun. And I would really encourage everyone to get into it, actually. I think probably in the 2010s or so, there was this great movement that you should start contributing to open source software and so on. And this is actually how I got into Cosmos in the first place, because I was just starting to open PRs for Cosmos during my grad thesis. And I think that really helps. Honestly, that's my biggest advice. Start working on interesting things, and then it doesn't feel as overwhelming, just one step at a time. But yeah, I know crypto, don't get distracted by all the noise. I feel like crypto is making a lot of waves and this is a fundamental innovation. You actually look at it and go that's a tweet. I don't know. We thought about this problem actually practically, because I've thought about this problem very practically, and good luck to you. We'll see each other in 4 years. Yes.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens.
So this is, I think, one aspect to it, and the other thing is do it for the right reasons. Don't do it for the meme coin stuff or anything like this. I'm here because I'm worried. How do we keep a coordination system going when fiber goes away? Because most of our AWS access will get cut off. In World War III, most of Europe doesn't have data center. Doesn't have the major connectivity to the US. So you have to worry how to keep local infrastructure running. And I always use this thought that don't be an American prepper, be a Swiss prepper. The American preppers are all about going into the middle of nowhere with a bunch of guns and canned food. I'm that's a terrible, terrible idea, because that model stops working the moment you break your leg. You want to be in a local community of 20,000 people or something like this that you actually deeply trust, that you can tightly coordinate with. It's not a smart idea to try to survive the apocalypse by yourself. It's a smart idea to help your local communities, get involved in a local ham radio club so you can keep emergency comms up when the internet goes out and things like this. Think about how you can get how you can decouple your power grid from the rest of Europe, things like this. Actually do things locally. I think that helps you actually enjoy this road much more, because it's much more practical to you, most people.
Right, absolutely. And I love I feel especially in the US, it's easy to feel we're all divergent individuals looking for the way to make it on our own. And you're very much advocating towards community, which is literally the most human thing about us, is we care about being in groups and succeeding in groups. That is human nature. All right. Well, Adrian, it's been so wonderful to have you on. Where can our audience find you?
You can, follow Anoma on Twitter or on X. I've never gotten used to calling it X. It's so weird.
Follow it on both.
Yeah. At Anoma. Follow me at Adrian Brink. Follow the blog. Things are happening. The testnet is still up. So play with the testnet. Hit me up on Twitter if you need an invite code. And then keep your eyes peeled for future announcements. There are things coming in the next couple of weeks. But follow Twitter if you actually want to be kept up to date.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. And join us next week when we'll be talking to Kim Courier, Head of Partnerships and Marketing at Decentralized, about the state of digital collectibles and the metaverse. But until then, stay tuned, stay informed, stay defiant.